Imagine sitting across from someone you think you know well, a colleague, a close friend, maybe even the person you share your bed with. On the surface, everything looks perfect. Their smile seems genuine, their words reassuring, their presence polished. And yet, in a fleeting instant, something shifts. A flicker in their eyes, a tightening of the jaw, a reaction too sharp for the situation. It passes quickly, like a shadow crossing the sun, but your instincts whisper, there's something beneath this mask. Carl Jung spent decades studying moments exactly like this. He believed that every one of us wears a mask, what he called the persona. It's not necessarily fake. It's the social costume we put on to survive in the world. We want to be liked, respected, accepted. But no matter how carefully we polish that mask, cracks will always appear. And through those cracks, the true character leaks out. Here's the unsettling truth. Jung uncovered. To see who someone really is, you don't need years of evidence. You don't need their resume, their reputation, or even their best stories. All you need to do is pay attention to two things. Two tells, two psychological leaks that nobody can fully control. Catch them, and the person before you will reveal more than they ever intended. The first reveal comes in their judgments, the moments when their criticism burns a little too hot, when their contempt lingers too long, or when their admiration seems exaggerated, almost worshipful. Jung realized that these judgments are rarely about the other person. They're about us. The qualities we condemn most violently in others are often the ones we've buried deep within ourselves. The traits we idolize, the ones we put on pedestals, often reflect strengths we secretly possess but haven't dared to claim. Picture David. On paper, he's a success and architect who prides himself on integrity. But bring up his colleague Marcus, and his entire demeanor changes. His voice sharpens, his lips tighten, and he spits words like fake and manipulative with venom. To the casual observer, it looks like professional rivalry, but Jung would have seen something else. Projection. David despises Marcus, not because of who Marcus is, but because Marcus reflects a part of David that he refuses to acknowledge. Deep down, David longs to be more socially skilled, more charming, more adaptable, but he's convinced himself that charm equals dishonesty, so he buries it. His hatred of Marcus is really hatred of his own disowned self. This is the first key to character. Watch where people's judgments flare, where their emotions feel disproportionate. That's where their shadow lives. The second reveal comes not when someone is calm, but when their mask is under threat. The moment their image, their competence, or their dignity is questioned. Most of us can hold the mask steady when life is smooth, but under pressure, that's when the real character slips through. Do they lash out? Do they deflect? Do they crumble? Or do they pause, breathe, and respond with authenticity? Think of Sarah, a marketing director admired for her composure. She's known as the unshakable one, the calm professional. But in one high-stakes meeting, a client criticized her strategy, and just like that, the calm mask shattered. Her tone turned sharp, her posture rigid. She deflected blame onto her team and made sly digs at the client's past decisions. In a matter of minutes, years of cultivated image collapsed, revealing a person far more insecure and defensive than anyone realized. For Jung, these moments of mask breakdown were gold. They showed the authentic pattern beneath the performance, the character that emerges when comfort disappears. So when you sit across from someone, whether a stranger, a partner, or even yourself, don't just listen to the polished words or the charming smile. Watch what they condemn most fiercely. Watch how they react when their pride is pricked. Those two tells judgment and mask maintenance will expose more about their true nature than any speech or story ever could. And perhaps the most terrifying part, if you dare to look closely, those same tells will expose you to yourself. Think back to the last time someone's behavior really got under your skin, not just annoyed you a little, but stuck with you. Maybe it was the co-worker who always had to be the center of attention, the neighbor who bragged about their new car, the friend who never stopped talking about themselves. You rolled your eyes, maybe you even vented about it later. But here's what Jung would have asked you. Why this person? Why this trait? Why does it bother you so much? Jung believed that our harshest judgments are not windows into other people's souls, but mirrors reflecting our own. He called this projection. When we disown parts of ourselves, qualities we dislike, traits we're ashamed of, impulses we've buried, they don't disappear. They slip into the unconscious, waiting for another face to wear, and when someone in the outside world embodies what we've tried to suppress, our reaction is explosive. We condemn them because, on some level, they remind us of us. Take David again, the architect who couldn't stop attacking Marcus for being fake. David thought he was describing Marcus's flaws, but in truth he was sketching a portrait of his own rejected self. The charm and social agility he saw in Marcus were qualities David longed for, but had labeled as manipulative. By condemning Marcus, he was protecting himself from confronting that longing. Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." David thought fate had cursed him with an irritating colleague, but in reality, his unconscious had handed him a mirror. And this mirror doesn't only show us what we despise, it also reflects what we secretly admire but cannot yet own. Think about the people you idolize, the ones you put on pedestals, the actress you describe as so talented, the friend you call fearless, the mentor you think of as brilliant. Yes, they may truly have those qualities, but Jung would whisper, so do you. You recognize them because they already live in you, waiting to be claimed. Admiration can be just as much projection as contempt. This is why shadow mapping is so powerful. It bypasses the stories people tell about themselves, and it bypasses the stories you tell yourself about them. It asks, where is the emotional intensity? Where do the flames burn hotter than the facts? That heat points directly to the unconscious material, the shadow that someone hasn't integrated. Consider Lisa, a woman who couldn't stand needy people. Every time a friend asked for help, every time a colleague admitted weakness, she grew cold, dismissive, even mocking. If you asked her why, she'd insist, I just can't respect people who don't handle their own problems. But Jung would see the deeper truth. Lisa had buried her own needs so deeply that she couldn't even admit them to herself. Growing up, she had learned that showing need was shameful, even dangerous, so she built a mask of self-sufficiency. And every time she saw someone else do what she could not express, her shadow flared. Shadow mapping shows us that our judgments are never neutral. The sharper they are, the closer they point to buried truth. And here's the key. The trait itself is not evil. Charm isn't evil. Neediness isn't evil. Ambition isn't evil. The problem is our relationship to it. By rejecting it, by pushing it into the shadow, we allow it to control us from the dark. Jung warned that what we deny in ourselves, we will inevitably meet in the world, again and again, in our bosses, our partners, our children. Until we face it, we are doomed to fight it outside of us. So the next time you catch yourself judging harshly, pause, write it down, ask, what does this reveal about me? What part of myself have I tried to bury? If you find yourself putting someone on a pedestal, ask, what does this admiration say about my own unlived potential? Because here's the paradox Jung uncovered. The very traits that irritate you most may be the ones you need to reclaim. And the qualities you worship in others may be the seeds of your own greatness. Shadow mapping is not about excusing bad behavior. It's not about saying, if I hate liars, it must mean I'm a liar too. No, it's about recognizing the emotional charge, the intensity that doesn't match the situation. That's your clue. That's the shadow at work. When you see it clearly, something shifts. You stop being ruled by unconscious projections. You stop mistaking your inner war for outer enemies, and you begin to see people not as mirrors of what you can't face, but as complex, flawed, human, just like you. This is the first reveal of true character, the map of shadows drawn not on someone's face, but in the way they judge, condemn, and admire. If you learn to read it, you'll never see people the same way again, and that's only half the story. Because the second reveal isn't about who we judge, it's about what happens when we are judged, when the mask cracks, when the image is threatened, and the raw self comes rushing through. That's where we'll go next. If shadow mapping shows us what people bury, mask maintenance shows us how fiercely they protect what they want you to see. Jung believed that the persona, the mask we all wear in public, requires constant upkeep. Like a stage actor who never leaves character, people invest enormous energy maintaining their image. But here's the catch. The more energy it takes, the more fragile it becomes. And under pressure, masks always crack. Think about Sarah, the calm, polished marketing director. In normal situations, she seemed unflappable. Meetings, deadlines, even office drama, nothing rattled her. Colleagues admired her composure, and she wore that admiration like armor. But in one crucial presentation, a client blindsided her with harsh criticism. In seconds, the calm professional vanished. Her tone sharpened, her posture stiffened, and she deflected blame onto her team. The mask had slipped, and what emerged was not the serene leader people thought they knew, but someone defensive, insecure, and even cruel. Jung argued that these cracks reveal more about character than years of surface behavior. Why? Because masks are chosen. Reactions under stress are not. They're instinctive, automatic. They come from the unconscious, bypassing the polished performance. And in that raw instant, you glimpse the real person. So what do you look for? Small, ordinary disruptions are often enough. Someone's phone dies and they can't scroll. They're left waiting longer than they expected. Their joke falls flat. Their authority is questioned in public. In these moments, watch carefully. Does their face tighten? Do they lash out? Do they sulk, withdraw, or scramble to repair the image? These micro breakdowns reveal the nervous system behind the mask. Let's take another example. Anthony, a charismatic CEO who prided himself on vision and confidence. His team saw him as fearless, always ready with an answer. But during an investor meeting, when someone challenged his numbers, the mask cracked. He didn't admit the flaw or seek clarification. Instead, he ridiculed the investor with cutting sarcasm. His mask of fearless leader gave way to a deeper pattern, aggression when threatened. To Jung, that single reaction spoke volumes about Anthony's true relationship with vulnerability. Mask maintenance is like stress testing a building. You don't know its weak points until pressure hits, and the way someone responds, fight, flight, or reflection, becomes their signature. Here's the key distinction. Mature, integrated people don't panic when their mask is threatened. They don't need to. When criticized, they pause. They breathe. They reflect, even if it stings. Because their identity isn't entirely built on the mask. They've made peace with the parts behind it. But those still trapped in persona will do almost anything to preserve it. Attack, deflect, betray others, all to keep the illusion intact. That's why Jung warned, the foundation of all mental illness is the unwillingness to experience legitimate suffering. Sarah couldn't stand the sting of criticism, so she sacrificed her authenticity and her team to escape it. Anthony couldn't bear vulnerability, so he lashed out to reassert dominance. Their masks weren't tools, they were prisons. And it doesn't take a boardroom or a crisis to see this. The smallest challenges will do. The friend who gets cut off in traffic and explodes with rage, the colleague whose suggestion is ignored and immediately grows sullen, the partner who's teased lightly and suddenly lashes back with a personal attack. These are all moments of persona breakdown, tiny windows into the raw self. When you learn to watch for these slips, you realize that true character doesn't reveal itself in grand speeches or carefully curated images. It reveals itself in micro moments. The joke not laughed at, the criticism unprepared for, the delay that stretches too long. That's when the unconscious steps forward. But here's where it becomes truly powerful. Shadow mapping and mask maintenance aren't separate tools. Together they form a system. Judgments show you what someone rejects in themselves. Mask slips show you how they defend that rejection. And if you can combine the two, you can see not only their character but their capacity for growth. This leads to Jung's ultimate test. Not just spotting shadows or masks, but observing how someone responds when those patterns are reflected back to them. Do they deny? Do they double down? Or can they integrate? That's where we'll go next. So far, we've seen two cracks in the mask, the judgments people throw outward and the slips that appear under pressure. But Jung's most piercing insight came when he asked a deeper question. What happens when you hold up a mirror? He called this the path of integration. It's one thing to catch someone projecting their shadow onto others. It's another to gently reflect it back and see how they respond. That response reveals not just their current character, but their potential. Think again of David, the architect who despised his colleague Marcus. Imagine someone asking him, "Do you ever wish you were more charming yourself?" Now watch carefully. There are three possible reactions. The first is pure denial. Are you saying I'm fake like him? Ridiculous. This is the unconscious type, blind to their projections, rigid in their defense. They live in a world of enemies and victims, never realizing they're fighting their own reflection. The second reaction is half-aware. Yeah, maybe I judge people too much, but that's just how I am. This is the aware but defended type. They can see the projection intellectually, but emotionally, they can't touch it. Growth stalls because the knowledge never sinks beneath the surface. The third response is the rarest and the most powerful. Actually, yes. Sometimes I do wish I had those skills. Maybe that's why Marcus bothers me so much. This is the integrated type. They can hold the paradox. Irritation mixed with envy. Judgment mixed with self-recognition. Instead of running from the shadow, they name it. And in naming it, they loosen its grip. Jung believed this ability, the courage to admit complexity, was the true marker of maturity. Because life doesn't demand perfection, it demands awareness. When someone can sit with the discomfort of their own contradictions, they stop projecting them outward. They stop needing masks to hide behind. They begin, slowly, to live authentically. But here's the challenge. Most people never reach this stage. Confronting the shadow feels like staring into a stranger's face, except the stranger is you. Denial feels safer. Defensiveness feels easier. That's why Jung warned, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The integration test is unsettling precisely because it exposes our limits, but it is also the doorway. When someone takes even a small step toward acknowledging their shadow, they unlock the possibility of change. So, the next time you catch a glimpse of someone's judgments or watch their mask slip, don't just label them. Reflect gently. Ask a question that points inward. Then, listen. Their response will tell you everything you need to know, not only about who they are, but about who they might become. The beauty of Jung's insight is that it isn't locked away in theory books. You can use it every single day, in love, in work, even in the way you raise your children. Because shadow mapping and mask maintenance don't just explain strangers, they explain the people closest to us. Start with relationships. Listen to how someone speaks about their exes, their friends, their co-workers. Do they complain that everyone is selfish, or all my exes were manipulative? That chorus of judgment is more than bad luck. It's a shadow projection, telling you what they haven't made peace with in themselves. The person who despises selfishness may secretly be starving to assert their own needs. The one who condemns manipulators might be terrified of their own desire for influence. If you're attentive, you'll realize they're not just talking about their past, they're telling you about their inner battles. In professional life, the mask slips in even subtler ways. Watch colleagues in meetings. When their ideas are questioned, do they grow curious or combative? Do they take feedback as fuel or as threat? The moment of challenge reveals far more than polished resumes. A true leader isn't the one who never makes mistakes, it's the one who can face mistakes without crumbling behind a mask. Jung would say, look at their reaction under fire, not their performance under spotlight. And then there's parenting, where Jung's insights can be transformational. Imagine your teenager comes home complaining, my friends are so fake. Instead of dismissing it, you could ask, do you ever feel like you have to hide parts of yourself too? In that moment, you're teaching them to see projection at work, to understand that judgments often point back to the self. You're not just solving an adolescent drama, you're planting the seed of lifelong self-awareness. But here's the warning. These tools are double-edged. They're not meant for manipulation or to win arguments by saying, aha, that's just your shadow. They're meant for compassion, because once you realize everyone is battling unseen parts of themselves, harshness softens. The angry boss, the needy friend, the defensive partner, they're not villains. They're people whose shadows are crying out to be seen. When you use Jung's framework this way, conversations deepen, conflicts turn into openings, and you start noticing the same truths in yourself. Every sharp judgment you cast becomes a clue. Every defensive reaction becomes an invitation. Jung's two reveals aren't just about reading others, they're about becoming conscious of your own patterns. And that's the real transformation, when you stop hunting shadows outside and start meeting the ones within. Every powerful tool carries a risk, and Jung warned that the ability to see through masks, to map shadows, could become poisonous if used without humility. Because once you learn to read people, a subtle temptation arises. The temptation to judge harder, to feel superior, even to manipulate. He called this the danger of shadow hunting. It's when you turn psychology into a weapon instead of a mirror. You catch someone projecting, and instead of responding with curiosity, you pounce. You say, see, that's your shadow talking. It feels clever. It makes you feel like you've won. But in that moment, You've stepped into your own shadow using insight to dominate rather than connect. The signs of misuse are easy to spot. You feel a little thrill of superiority when you figure someone out. You start analyzing others obsessively, but rarely turn the same gaze inward. You use their mask slips as ammunition in arguments, and slowly, without realizing it, you become exactly what Jung feared, someone who hides from their own unconscious by obsessing over everyone else's. He once wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." Becoming a shadow hunter is one of those absurdities. It looks like insight, but it's really avoidance. It disconnects you from compassion, and it isolates you from true intimacy. Because here's the paradox. The more you weaponize psychology, the lonelier you become. People sense when they are being analyzed instead of understood. They feel turned into case studies, not companions. And what begins as the thrill of insight ends as alienation. The antidote is what Jung called an ethical relationship to the unconscious. That means using these revelations not to control, but to understand. To realize that when someone's mask slips, you're not catching them out, you're glimpsing their pain. When someone's judgments flare, you're not exposing hypocrisy, you're seeing the conflict they've never learned to integrate. And when you see that clearly, superiority dissolves, because the truth is, you do it too. You project, you defend your persona, you flinch under criticism. The only difference is whether you're willing to admit it. So as you sharpen your eye for shadows and masks, sharpen your heart for compassion as well. Don't make every conversation a diagnosis. Don't reduce people to their defenses. Instead, let insight soften your judgment. Let it remind you that everyone you meet is carrying battles you can't see. Used with humility, Jung's framework doesn't create walls of analysis. It builds bridges of empathy, and in a world full of masks, that bridge might be the most radical thing you can offer. There comes a moment in this journey when the lens you've been pointing outward suddenly turns around. Jung called it the mirror effect. And it's the most unsettling and liberating part of all. At first, it feels thrilling to spot other people's shadows, to notice their masks cracking. But then you realize, every time you catch a projection, every time you witness a slip, you're also staring at your own reflection. The world becomes a hall of mirrors, and everyone you meet is showing you something about yourself. Take arrogance. If arrogant people drive you crazy, Jung would ask, what's your relationship to confidence? Do you suppress your own pride so much that anyone displaying it feels unbearable? Or take neediness. If needy friends drain you, ask, how do you treat your own need for connection? Do you starve it, pretending you don't care? What irritates you most in others is usually the very thing you can't bear to face in yourself. And it works in the opposite direction too. The people you admire with almost childlike awe, the fearless, the creative, the charismatic, they're mirrors as well. You recognize them because their light matches something already inside you. By putting them on pedestals, you're projecting not weakness, but potential. Your unlived possibilities, shining back at you through someone else's brilliance. The mirror effect explains why certain strangers feel oddly familiar, as if you've known them forever. Jung would say it's not them you recognize, it's the archetype they embody, a pattern that resonates with your own psyche. The rebel, the healer, the trickster, the sage. They stir something ancient within you, reminding you of who you are and who you might become. But here's the challenge. The mirror doesn't flatter. It confronts. It shows you the pieces you've disowned, the potential you've ignored, the contradictions you've refused to hold. And it asks, will you turn away or will you look deeper? Most people turn away. They dismiss the mirror as annoying, inconvenient, even hostile. But those who dare to look, who can say, yes, I see myself in this, step onto the path of individuation. They stop chasing enemies and idols in the outside world, and they begin reclaiming their own complexity. Jung wrote, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. The mirror effect is that awakening. Every judgment becomes data, every irritation becomes a clue, every admiration becomes an invitation. And suddenly, life itself becomes the classroom, every person a teacher. In the end, the mirror effect is not about others at all, it's about you. Because the ultimate character you're learning to read, the one you'll spend your whole life decoding, is your own. If shadow mapping shows us where we project, and mask maintenance shows us how we defend, then the mirror effect asks us to take responsibility. But Jung never stopped there. His ultimate goal was not just awareness, it was transformation. He called it individuation, the process of becoming whole, of weaving together the fragments of self into an authentic life. This is where the journey turns inward, because once you see shadows in others, once you notice masks slipping, you can't avoid the question, what about me? Where do my judgments flare? Where does my persona crack? Where do I project my unlived possibilities onto the world? The answers are never comfortable. Jung warned, there is no coming to consciousness without pain, but that pain is not punishment, it is initiation. Picture yourself in a difficult conversation. Someone criticizes you unexpectedly. Your first instinct is to defend, to explain, to push back. But then you pause. You remember, this is the mask maintenance moment. You breathe. You ask, what if there's truth here? In that pause, you make a different choice. Instead of hiding behind the persona, you let a piece of your authentic self emerge. That tiny shift, that one conscious breath is individuation in action. Or imagine catching yourself judging a friend harshly. You think, she's so desperate for attention. But instead of indulging the contempt, you stop. You ask, where am I desperate to be seen? What part of me longs for recognition? Suddenly, the judgment becomes a doorway. You see your own shadow, and instead of rejecting it, you integrate it. That moment of honesty is growth. These are small acts, but they ripple outward. Jung believed that when one person becomes more conscious, it changes the fabric of every relationship around them. You stop feeding unconscious drama. You stop being baited by projections. You hold paradox instead of collapsing into certainty. And people notice. They may not have words for it, but they feel it. They say you seem calmer, more real, more grounded. What they're sensing is the disappearance of your mask. But individuation isn't the end of struggle. It's not about reaching a perfect state where you never project or never defend. It's about living with awareness, seeing the shadow without fear, catching the mask without shame, meeting the mirror without denial, again and again, moment by moment. And in that practice, something extraordinary happens. Relationships deepen, conflicts become opportunities for connection. Even loneliness transforms, because instead of craving validation from others, you begin to find authenticity within. Jung wrote, man's task is to become conscious of the contents that press upward from the unconscious. That is the work, not to be flawless, but to be conscious, not to eradicate the shadow, but to live with it as part of the whole. So when you walk into the world tomorrow, remember this. Watch where people judge. Watch how they react when the mask slips. And most of all, watch yourself, because the ultimate character you're uncovering isn't someone else's, it's your own. And that, Jung believed, is the privilege of a lifetime, to become who you truly are.